Welcome to the Weekly Bioanalysis, a KCAS podcast.
Hello and welcome to the 22nd episode of the Weekly Bioanalysis. My name is John Perkins and I'm the Senior Scientific Advisor for all things related to LCMS technologies. I've been with KCAS 1 week short of a year, but I've been in Bioanalytical for over 26 years. I'm here with my co-host Dominic Guarino.
Hello, my name is Dominic Guarino, and I'm also a Senior Scientific Advisor here at KCAS. I'm a subject matter expert for all things related to ligand binding assays, biomarkers, and flow cytometry. I've been with KCAS for about 7.5 years, and I've been in the bioanalytical space for close to 26 years. John?
Today's podcast, as always, is brought to you by KCAS, Bioanalytical and Biomarker Services. KCAS is a bioanalytical laboratory located in Kansas City, Kansas, serving the pharmaceutical and biotech industries for over 40 years now. Dom and I are senior scientific advisors at KCAS, and either or both of us are available to answer any questions you may have regarding this podcast or any of KCAS's services. We are thrilled to have you listening again. As mentioned, this will be our 22nd week recording the podcast, so if you're interested, the other episodes can be found at kcsbio.com. As a reminder, you can follow us on Twitter at @TheWeeklyBio and at KCSBio. We started this podcast because the current business environment prevents face-to-face communication. We're broadcasting from completely different places. I'm in upstate New York, where the colours are turning. Dom is in Kansas City, and our producer's in Missouri. This weekly podcast gives the chance to connect with all of you, and we hope it's a chance for you to get to know us too. And even more, it's a chance for you to get to know KCAS and the services we provide. As always, a review of the latest news and resources, and then a focus on a topic of our choosing before discussing any feedback we've had from you. We're always looking for topics to discuss, and we'd be happy to talk through something that you want us to cover. Then we will wrap up and give you a little teaser for next week, letting you know what is coming in the future. So again, we're thrilled to have you here, and we're looking forward to a fun episode today. To kick us off, Dom is going to go over today's agenda and podcast topic a bit before we jump into the news and resources section. Dom.
Yeah, John, it's podcast number 22. The topic for today is part 3 in our series, The Impact COVID is Having on Drug Development. We're going to focus on clinical drug development today. It is a wonderful podcast we got laid out today. As always, we'll do our news and resources and then the main portion. And as I mentioned, it will focus on clinical drug development during COVID. We'll touch on clinical trials specifically and what's happening in terms of phase 1 units and other like physicians' offices that support phase 2 and phase 3. The current status for, current status of non-COVID related trials, and then some of the impacts it's having on supplies. And then lastly, we'll look at a focus on biomarker testing and what impact that has had on not only drug development, but specifically in the clinical space. So again, John, we're pretty excited about things and looking forward to an exciting podcast number 22. And with that, let's dive right into the news and resources. So let's start as we normally do with COVID. Well, big news today, as most of America knows. President Trump and his wife were confirmed to be COVID positive, which we all hope for a speedy recovery. We hope everything stays well with the president. But, John, I think this is just one of those moments where we all hope this isn't a sign of, negative things to come. And we just hope it's, kind of the course towards the solution to the issue and not something that sets us back. So with that, John, I'll give you a couple seconds and then we'll move on to our
agreed
on COVID.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm still sort of processing this one. I definitely wish them and anyone who catches this virus a speedy and full recovery. But I mean, it really shows that this is hopefully it helps other people learn to take this seriously. This is a virus. It's got no respect for status or who you are. And if, unfortunately, if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, there's a chance you might catch it. So I'd like to say, hopefully they don't have too many adverse effects or any adverse effects. And and come to
Yeah,
this.
it's really got me evaluating going to the gym and all sorts of things that, I talk about a bubble. I'm kind of serious about it. I've expanded that bubble and been doing things that are more of high risk. And they're not like super high risk. I'm not outdoor venues and crowds of more than 500, for instance, or even flying, everything. Those are risky things to be doing. So,
yeah, I mean, I think,
but yeah, I don't know. I just hope it doesn't make us slide into, panic or,
exactly.
move us in the wrong direction, like, the stock market, all of it. Just let's hey, this is a path towards the solution to this thing.
Yeah,
with
sure.
The
I think
vaccine, right?
I think it reflects what John Bucksath said at the end of the company meeting yesterday. Is just be careful and be vigilant with this and stay safe. It's you gear your life around habits that minimize your risk in this kind of thing.
Yeah, and John does it at all of our
Yes.
weekly updates. Like you said, and it's a good reminder. And I hope our organization. I felt like our organization's guard has never lowered. And I think we're staying, and this will only continue to highlight it. And, like you said, John, that was a good moment there about John Bucksath, our CEO, mentioning to always, try to do the right things and listen to the guidelines. And we're always posting them. So with that, John, kind of somber. That stinks.
Yep.
We're actually, doing a Friday. It's episode 22. We've got a jam-packed show, but, it is what it is. And it's one of those moments where,
yeah, I mean,
if we all have to stay calm and not do our jobs, right?
If we'd kept our usual schedule, we wouldn't have talked about this at all, because we'd have been recorded and doing something else completely right.
Yeah, but it is a moment where we want to, both of us, we don't care about political views in this moments like this. It's all about healing and moving on. And as I keep thinking about it like this, we got to have a course towards a solution and what life might look like. And John, it might be, you're walking into places and, either giving your saliva or giving a test and then, waiting 20 seconds and seeing if you can go in or wearing a mask. And that's just life now, I don't know. So
yeah,
we'll see.
I think obviously we've a lot of stuff to talk about today. But there is the one article that I found yesterday that I would really like to talk about in more depth that might drive how we test, etc. But we're not ready to talk about this week. I think it merits a more thorough discussion.
All right, so this is Jeremy. I'm the producer, and we're going to do something we never really have before. We're going to take a moment. Obviously, the news today about President Trump being diagnosed with COVID is something that is an ongoing news story, so there are elements that are still coming out. So here we are, hours after the recording that we made this morning with Dom and John. We're actually going to interject a little bit more news because this is a weekly episode. We felt that it was probably most timely for us to get some of this out. Quote, out of an abundance of caution and at the recommendation of his physician and medical experts, the president will be working from the presidential offices at Walter Reed Hospital for the next few days. And that's a release from the White House literally minutes ago. And unfortunately, John, who is on the East Coast, is already out of the office for the afternoon. But Dom, here with me in the Midwest, is still available and was most kind enough to hop on and give his insight on some of the treatment that President Trump will be receiving there at Walter Reed. So, Dom, I will pitch it over to you, sir.
You bet, Jeremy. Thanks. This is what a country we live in, and hopefully the president's health is going to benefit from this, but he is receiving what is called REGN-CoV-2 or Regen-CoV-2 for Regeneron CoV-2, which is two antibodies. They target multiple different regions of the critical receptor binding domain, or what is referred to as the RBD, receptor binding domain, of the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein. So he's getting two antibodies that target the receptor binding domain of the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein. The spike protein on the virus surface binds to the host cells and is required for infectivity. By blocking its interaction with the hosts, cell antibodies they're able to neutralize and block infection. So they've got these pair of antibodies They're potent against the area where the spike protein, which is the most abundant protein on the SARS-CoV particle, and the receptor binding region. So then by blocking it, what they're hoping by doing a dual multi-antibody approach, they're hoping to decrease the potential for virus escape. So that's a little bit of background on the REGEN-COV2. And so additionally, in addition to that treatment, he's taken zinc, vitamin D, melatonin, aspirin, and what is the heartburn drug, Pepcid. To note, President Trump received the higher of the two doses that Regeneron is testing in phase 1 trials with COVID patients. And that is a 275 patient enrollment designed to evaluate antiviral activity and identify patients most likely to benefit from treatment. So this is somewhat ongoing. This is quite exciting. Well, Jeremy, thanks for allowing me to come in and touch on this real fast, but exciting stuff, and we wish the president well.
Yeah, I do appreciate you taking the time to do this, Dom. It's all obviously ongoing news story. Even for Regeneron, this is probably something they're going to see some changes on. If nothing else, they'll see a spike in their stock price probably over the weekend, or on Monday when stocks reopen. But as these sort of things kind of come up, we try to stay on top of them. But of course, being a weekly show, we're somewhat limited. So we were very glad that Dominic was able to do this. Thank you again, sir.
No problem, Jeremy. I look forward to diving in a little bit more on the next podcast around how this is not only a therapeutic, but appears to be somewhat of a vaccine. So, and then even if you recall, we talked about Regeneron way back in I think the May timeframe when we first started, how they back in February started taking pieces of the virus, keyed in on this receptor binding domain, and then used their proprietary murine models to generate these antibodies. And it's just rocket speed, warp speed. So Jeremy, no problem at all hopping on talking about it.
Well, thank you very much. And for you, the listeners, we now bring you back to your regularly scheduled portion of the podcast. So thank you both so much.
But let's move on to the fourth article, which is about a test.
It's from Hologenics. Yeah, John, go ahead. Kick us a little bit more about that test.
Yeah, basically the FDA authorized a high-throughput COVID-19 test from Hologic. So it's actually where much of the testing has been driven by people who are showing symptoms. This actually authorizes the testing of people with no symptoms. And even the key thing I picked out of this was that it's actually, because it's a highly sensitive test, they're looking at, it's authorized for pool testing, so you can combine samples from a lot of people into one, and the sensitivity mitigates the effect of dilution of pooling, such that you get rapid results for people. And if you have a positive test for a pool, then you obviously have to go back and do individual testing. But I didn't want to steal your thunder on that, but it's a nice step forward.
It's a great one. And I think I got to translate some of your pool. I don't know if people know what that means, maybe, but so pool testing is quite common. And what they mean is they'll take 10 donors and all of them will be pooled into one sample, and then it's put on the assay. And if it pops up negative, all 10 are negative. But if it pops up positive, they reflex test it, right? And then they look at all 10 of them individually.
Yep.
So that allows for a higher throughput, right? Just to clarify, because you're saying you keep using not only is your accent getting in the way, they might not know what pooling of samples is. So I thought there.
So it has 1,000 sample per day capability. If you can combine 10 samples, you're basically, that basically means 10,000 you can do at once.
Yeah, 10,000, and an analyst normally does what, 60 to 90, right? So that's the level of throughput this has to it, which is fantastic. But more importantly, as you mentioned, and I want to hammer it home, it's asymptomatic. So this is you might have been in contact with somebody, yet you're feeling fine. Guys like me that are trying to, John, I feel so much better going to the gym. I literally think I've lost 5 pounds this week because I'm and not just going to the gym and riding a treadmill in a corner. I'm talking about getting back into the weight room, which was crowded. And it's scary, but so this test is for people like me who are doing things. I want to be asymptomatic. I'm going to go in and get proactively tested. So I love this, John. I think it's a big step forward.
Yep.
Towards, kind of bringing some stress level down. And that's, very pertinent to what's happening today.
Okay, yeah, I agree. Anything like
Yeah.
this that we can could move us forward, I'm all in favour of. And then next story was this is actually again looking at some of the effects of COVID, and a couple of studies looking at gravely ill patients found that 14% had a couple of genetic flaws that opened them that were probably driving why they get seriously ill. Based for for many viruses, type one interferon is a fighter against the virus, and there's a theory that it isn't functioning properly in some patients, particularly seriously ill ones. And when a couple of these two studies looked into it, there was one study I think that was in Canada, looking at 987 patients.
Yeah.
10.2% of those gravely ill patients, all ethnicities. There was no localized cohort. 94% of the seriously ill people that had the flaw had a rogue antibody that actually attacks type 1 interferon to prevent it then addressing the virus. I mean, it's one of those articles that I mean, my biology knowledge is next to nil, but I'm obviously picking up a lot the more we discuss this, and the stuff that goes on in your body,
Oh,
it's incredible. And yeah, my hats off to all people who figured this kind of stuff out. It really is, it's amazing.
yeah. So a couple things. Interferon is, there's many of them. IFN gamma is the one you usually hear in an immuno-oncology setting that helps trigger and promote pro-inflammatory T cell responses. Viral responses are the interferon ones, like this one, more your gamma alphas and betas, and it is definitely innate immune response stuff, and it is the frontline defense. Think of it as like pawns on a chessboard. And so if you're lacking those pawns, you are susceptible, right? So that's what these type 1 interferons are. And to your point, autoantibodies against them, and I could speculate on why you're seeing such a high rate because people are dosed with interferons for treatment of cancer as well. But beside that, there's that's why they're, to your point, John, it's unbelievable that we understand all this, but the redundancy of it is the problem. There are so many types of interferons, and that's why it's like type 1. There's like 6 or 8 of that. And then the mechanisms of your body's redundancy pathways in general make studying cells and immunology challenging, right? Just like biochemistry is. But anyhow, John, great story.
There's several.
Good place coming out of it.
There's a several take-home messages from this that obviously bear further discussion and investigation. So one thing I didn't touch on. So it was 10.2% of the 987 gravely ill patients had this rogue antibody, but none of the 663 patient control group had it. So I mean,
Yeah.
it definitely implicated it. It's also that these two studies both pointed to the fact that type 1 interferon is critical for fighting SARS-CoV-2 infection. There's also, they talk about can synthetic interferons help counter the disease, but then if they've got the rogue antibody, chances are it's going to break that down, so that's not going to work either. And then someone else said, and this actually could be, where we're talking about use of convalescent plasma as a potential treatment, this could be an issue if you if you administer convalescent plasma to someone that has rogue antibodies in it. You've then introduced an additional risk to those patients. So yeah, lots of interesting offshoots from this too.
Just make sure your plasma is coming from an under 30-year-old, and you won't have those autoantibodies. No,
Yes.
you'll be okay. No, but you're right. There's the whole. We're discovering many autoimmune diseases, and this is highlighting it. And there's a lot of unfortunateness to COVID, but the advancement in science is just running at a sprint right now in terms of immunology and virology.
Yep.
Understanding, because we're just so much more is being poured into it at a historic level. But we'll go on to the next story, John, because I could sit here and talk all day about autoantibodies to endogenous cytokines, but I think I'd bore the audience with that a little bit. So the next one is from the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine, right? So this is a kind of neat fight against COVID-19, right? Is this the tiny?
This is the tiny antibody.
Yeah.
It's the potential to fight. So they basically looked at a whole load of fragments and a load of antibody fragments and what bound well to the spike protein, and then designed a reduced size antibody based on that. So it's fusing the variable domain of a heavy chain of antibody with an an immunoglobulin tail. And so it's like half the size of a full immunoglobulin, and about is it a tenth of the size of full antibody. So it actually, they think it can be help, delivery by respiratory mechanism, also enhanced penetration into tissues, things like that. So yeah, it's again, it's these clever ways how people are addressing this, not just taking the full antibody approach, but where can we take the active pieces of the antibodies and then deliver them a different way.
Yeah, it's great stuff. It's AB8, right, is what it's called. They've done some great kind of like nano sizing the antibody almost, right? Like they're thinking really creatively. I don't know who this John Mellors is. He's the MD. I'm not familiar with him, although I know at Pitt they did a lot of what is probably device space. They had things like gene guns and all sorts of ways, gold coated particles to try and vaccinate with. So it doesn't surprise me that over time they've gotten into the needle. I read here there's really a sugar based way of injecting it as well. All sorts of real cool things around pediatric designs and just fascinating, John.
Just to sort of highlight why this is exciting is that it has shown effectiveness in mice and hamsters, which, as we discussed previously, is coming to the fore as an animal model for cells. Yeah. So there's real potential here.
Yeah, they've got a. I think it's just, I know that area really well. Obviously, got a degree there, but their immunology is so strong. That's what I studied there, and then they have a ton of good bioengineering, and they're all putting it all together, and really, really good to see. So the next story, and we got a few more, John. We're gonna have to pick up the pace, right? New hope. Right, how new insight into the coronavirus spike protein might inspire vaccine development. So this is a story around kind of doing a new way of vaccinating. Right, this is out of the University of California, San Diego.
Yep,
using glycans. Right.
So yeah, where most teams focus on the spike protein, this group are looking at can they disrupt the glycans that actually shield the spike protein and prevent things getting to it. When they looked at they actually found that glycans at two sites, N165 and N234, recognize target cells and promote infection by stabilizing the shape of the receptor binding domain of the spike protein. And so their approach is to introduce a mutation at those sites to then reduce binding to ACE2. So yeah.
No, it's what I talk about will be if I have to predict where I see natural immunity taking place, it's somewhere in the ACE2, and that's what they're targeting, and it's good stuff. Just what we want to share with our audience is there's other vaccines coming up that are taking a different approach, and just we're going to solve this thing. Even if the vaccines that hit the market are all at 50%, we got things like this coming through that I think will fill any gaps, and they're years behind, but this is just great stuff and has application obviously towards other disease states.
That's the key thing, isn't it? I mean, we've got the vaccines coming through now. We talked about this in other podcasts. There's obviously a lot of teams looking at different mechanisms that their vaccines can operate through. So even if the virus mutates, there's different, because we're coming at it from lots of different angles, we're possibly prepared to address those mutations ahead of time, and we will build protection against it.
Yeah, no, and I keep talking about that ACE2, and I'm not alone in my thoughts, but that is going to be, to me, like a secret little, not a secret little, but it's a key. Your immune system's all lock and key mechanisms. That's a very important lock, and so therein lies some solution. And these guys are, they went right at it with their Pitkovavac, I think is what they called it, or something cool. So that was a different group. But anyhow, John, we're going to move on to Johnson & Johnson, a big player in the field. They began a 60,000 subject phase 3 subject, 60,000 subject phase 3 trial for their COVID vaccine. And just, again, great news. This is really great to see one of the leaders, and looks like it's a vector based, so an adenoviral based vector. Yeah, so great stuff.
There's a lot of news about a lot of the front runners this week. Obviously J&J moving into phase 3. That's a big deal for a couple of reasons. It's shown effectiveness in phase 1 after one dose. So the hope is, although they are testing a single dose and a dual dose administration, but if it's effective after a single dose, then obviously it means it can be rolled out to many more people, and they don't have to wait for that second dose for effectiveness to kick in. It also has they expect good temperature stability. They're talking more than 3 months refrigerated. So logistically, this isn't the challenge that some of the other, like the mRNA based vaccines have. Again, the front runner is Pfizer, which now seems to be going out by itself because Moderna have said that their likely application for approval isn't going to happen until early 2021. AstraZeneca, although it's moving forward in the UK, Brazil, India, and South Africa, they're coming under increased scrutiny by the FDA. Yeah. And also Inovio's vaccine is on clinical hold while they have to compose a response to the FDA about their study design for their phase 2/phase 3 study. So yeah, a lot of up and downs in terms of who's making progress, who's not, and that's
a good summary. I'm not going to add anything, John. I think you even covered the next article around Inovio being put on hold as they got an FDA warning, and but otherwise you touched on all the big players, and for the sake of time, the vaccines are moving along, but it looks like Pfizer's in the lead, right?
So, absolutely. Yeah, totally. Yeah, they're out there by themselves right now. So yeah, the question how quickly they can go. But as we've said before, that's the one with the logistic challenges of how do you deal with something that's only stable at minus 70.
Yeah. And so, John, maybe that closes out COVID, where we'll move on to a couple of non-COVID, because I think they're fascinating, and they kind of build in some themes we've been talking about in terms of how people feel about big pharma. And it was on the increase, and you saw ad time going up. And then there was the article this week about Celgene, who repeatedly raised one of their drug prices to hit aggressive sales goals. And then a congressional probe finds this out. So, all this good momentum, and Celgene's part of BMS, right? Yeah,
they are now. Yes. But this is pre-BMS days. Now, right? But this is sort of frustrating for someone who really believes in what the pharma industry does for us in terms of the long-term benefits that we've all reaped from the pharma industry, but there's still these practices that go on that are going to contribute to the really poor public perception and suspicion of the pharma industry. In this case, this was Revlimid, which is a drug for multiple myeloma and myelodysplastic syndromes, which, as I checked yesterday, is a group of cancers where immature blood cells in bone marrow don't mature and become healthy blood cells. But it's basically Celgene set aggressive sales targets, and when they were falling short of the targets, they basically upped the price of Revlimid to help them meet those targets. And the price increases are phenomenal. So from 2014 to 2019, it went from $215 a pill to $763 a pill after 20 separate price increases, and that corresponds to if you have to take this drug, $16,000 a month.
Yeah, I mean, you just know someone's eventually going to figure this out. Like, come on, this is everything that's bad about, like, your cable company and everything else. Like, it's just. I don't know. Yeah, it's not going to go away, John.
Well,
it's going to happen again.
It won't. That's the sad thing. But it's interesting that this probe is actually looking at it. It's not just Celgene. I think the Celgene one is because the probe is basically said, this is definitely going on at Celgene, but it's set up to look at the pricing strategies behind the 19 most profitable drugs, and so other companies in the spotlight are BMS, who now own Celgene, Teva, Amgen, Novartis, and Mallinckrodt. So it's another sort of thing to watch with interest. But as someone who's intimately involved in drug development, really wish these kind of stories would go away. You want people to be doing the right thing, but
and they're gonna. All these CEOs are probably somewhat, at a hand's distance from what might be going on. When you get that type of stuff, that sounds more like your executive sales director level, who's like, all right, let's do it. Or I don't know. I guess I'm not sure how it all works out, but I'm sure these CEOs, if someone said, hey, here's the plan over the next 4 years, we're going to raise this thing 20 times, and it's going to go from $250 a pill to $750 a pill. I think they no to that, right? They're going to say no. I mean, but anyhow, this is, it kind of makes me, it's getting my blood boiling, because it feels like the cable company, when I talked to them earlier in the week, is they have already raised my cable prices, John. So
our internet provider has definitely fallen short lately, and we've asked them to sort of come out and look at our Wi-Fi has been appalling lately, but we're making the switch next week because we're just tired of just lousy service. So,
and I knew it was striking a chord with you, but I'm having a similar thing. So one last note. This one happened. I think it happened a couple of weeks ago now, but it was worth mentioning. It. The Chinese customs raids J&J CAR T-cell partner Legend's office and puts new CEO under residential surveillance. So again, more bad press for the pharma industry, but this one is quite funny that they put a mysterious note by the Hong Kong exchange, right? So looks like the CEO had either leaked some information, John. I mean, it was just something where you don't want to read about CEOs getting detained in China.
Sure, it's suspected violations of import and export regulations under Chinese laws. So, but it was down to the company that he was at before Legend, GenScript, and a number of employees being detained for question. I haven't seen any follow up on this, so I don't know any further developments. But yeah. Again, it's not going to do much for your company's credibility if your CEO's under house arrest. So yes.
Yeah. No, and I think it, bodes well towards maybe even our main portion, John, because we're going to start talking about
let's move on.
The impact of COVID has on the drug development industry, particularly clinical trials. Right, John? Are we ready to move on from the news and resources onto our main portion?
I think we should. There's so much news at the moment. This is the thing. I remember we talked about the agenda for this podcast a few days ago, and I'm like, well, I haven't really seen anything very much. And 3 days later, there's just tons, Can't
the vaccines and then Trump and everything. Yeah, it's been a big week of news. Yeah, and so much great science going back on too. Sorry to cut off there.
Yeah, I think that's it. I love how much people are digging into the mechanisms and mechanisms of not just how the disease functions, but of how we address it. And it's just so much to read about and learn about this.
Yeah, clearly people have been spending months, and we're reaping some benefits of nuggets of information that came out early. And hey, we got this tool over here. I wonder how we can help out. And that's what we're feeling, I think, with a lot of the stories we went over. But John, on the clinical trial side, there's this is part 3 of our series. We talked about just drug development during COVID, and John Bucksath, our CEO, very nicely shared just the overall sort of 30,000-foot view from a CRO space for drug development, specifically in the bioanalytical bioanalysis space. We covered preclinical last week, and now we're on to clinical. And clinical trials, John, as you know, it's been, clearly they were put on hold. We initially heard 30 days, and we all knew as we got it. This was back in February. And then you kind of knew, oh boy, it's going to be more than 30. And then it was kind of a 90-day thing. And then it got we're pushing another 90. And now it's slowly opening back up. But clearly, there's the key word, slowly. And there's a couple specific articles that address it. But we are seeing more, at least sample wise, we're seeing more, a little bit of an uptick, and we're certainly seeing an uptick in demand for supported clinical trials. But most of that's driven from the phase units opening up in physicians' offices, right? These satellite offices essentially are, a lot of them are connected through big conglomerates, and they're essentially like phase 3 units that are scattered about the country, and they, your local lab corps and things like that. So, John, I think there is a general loosening, but I don't know if we'll ever get to that level we were pre-COVID anytime soon. But that has been, obviously, when we talk about drug development during COVID and clinical trials, the biggest thing has been the inability to do your phase 1s and first in humans, in addition to people just not going to physicians' offices, so that's shutting down your later phases.
Yeah, I
John,
think it's interesting as you dig into the background of this. There's a mix out there in terms of optimism and obviously pessimism and some sort of contradictory findings. So PPD, who are one of the big CROs out there, they actually have upped their revenue guidance based on going into, I think that would be Q3 quarterly revenue guidance. But early in the year, they downed their revenue forecast. But as they're dealing with COVID, they sort of, their mix of work has changed. Their lab testing has gone up. Their clinical development services has dropped, but they're sort of, one's balancing out the other, and so they're seeing some benefits of COVID and some negatives. So it's yeah, so I think in the CRO space, that's sort of similar to what we were seeing. We saw that slowdown in March, April, particularly April, thinking what's going to happen here, and we have seen things come back where people are really planning ahead. We had a discussion, I think it was last week, with a company who they're thinking about their clinical trial. They're planning far ahead because they don't know how easy it's going to be to get a slot. Because one of the other reports that we were talking about said that of 300,000 worldwide clinical sites, there's still 28,000 suspended. So there's still a lot of places are still closed. So that makes it more difficult to get a slot. And so that report also cited a concern about the long-term viability of some investigator sites, because if they're not open now, will they ever reopen? So again, that pot of places where you can run your study is reduced. I mean, that's like almost a 10% reduction in terms of capacity.
Yeah, no, I think you said a lot in there, John. And one of the reasons why you're seeing that pent up demand is we've got, I don't know, what is there? There must be 100 clinical. I think what did I see? 110 or 150 COVID trials, or no, maybe it's 300. I don't know what the number is, but that is driving a lot of your clinical trial units to, that they're going to be clear. Their capacity is going to be exhausted by that, and I think that's part why you're seeing such a big lead time. And people who really understand drug development are those are the ones that are engaging you now, John, because they understand that they're going to have to get in line, or they understand that the COVID vaccine will exhaust the number of patients that are available for clinical trials. Right, these are big numbers relative to a first in human who might need 10 people. Right, so
that's
I think that's really what's happening here, and that's why the forecast is so bright for places like PPD.
That's why that was another message that we've heard, is that studies might be started, but actually finding trial participants is tough, because they're tending to go to COVID trials. We certainly are aware of one set of trials that they're having real problems recruiting patients.
Yeah, and there was an article a few weeks ago that we, I don't think we actually talked about it on air, but we talked about it off air, where there is, like you just said, as these clinics are opening up and there's still many closed, their focus is on COVID. So, there isn't a whole lot of pent up demand to go out and help, the immuno-oncology space, for instance, although I think that's coming back slowly. No one's losing sight of that, but the COVID roller coaster, I think will continue to, dominate that space and probably to some degree bump things. I know, like NASH studies, there's one, the liver disease, that is one that non-alcohol associated disease there, and that is one that for something we support a couple companies there, and they're really having trouble getting their accrual numbers because of COVID.
Yeah, at least one of these reports cited that phase 2 and phase 3 trials are the ones that are hardest hit, and they're actually the ones that people want to wrap up sooner because of the expensive trials to run as well. So it's a real conundrum for the
Well,
pharma companies.
yeah, think about it. You're just people. I mean, obviously, the number of people going to the doctor's office is incredibly low, and that's where people sometimes get enrolled. People just aren't going to the doctor, and that's
Sure.
going to impact the clinical world. So, John,
So
we talked about slow opening and phase 1 units. We talked about some physician offices and so forth. We talked about the current status of enrollment for non-COVID trials. At least we touched on it. We mentioned certainly NASH and even the neurodegenerative spaces. That one's, again, they were absolutely halted. I felt like there was a little bit of a blip upwards. I think there was this COVID rush. And now that's kind of, not, I don't want to say behind us, but it's being managed by these. I do feel like there's an uptick in non-COVID related trials, especially in the CAR T-cell space, as I mentioned, the NASH space, and then also in the neurodegenerative. But again, it's nowhere near pre-COVID levels.
Sure, absolutely. Yep. So,
and then, impact on supplies and kitting. That's like the last item on our agenda here, John. We have so many that is increasing. At least I feel like it is. I don't know about you, but we're constantly having people ask for that. They're having problems, so that still seems to be a big, somewhat of an issue, and one that for whatever reason, not for every reason, we have made a lot of proactive decisions so that we don't have any problem with our supply chains for kitting. But we're seeing, at least on the biologic side, John, we're seeing more and more people ask and have interest in that side of things.
Yeah, I'm out of the loop sufficiently on that I haven't seen how we've been impacted. I know it's been raised in company meetings that our lead times to get things in have increased, but I mean it's inevitable. We're all chasing the same supplies, and we've seen that where manufacturing slowed down. Some of the supplies that we've struggled to get in, it's surprising because you almost take them for granted, but because of just the general slowdown in industry, that we're impacted by that.
Yeah, Band-Aids, needles. I think they're making them, but they're not as easy as they once were. So, John, we got one more topic for the main portion today, and that's the impact of COVID on biomarker testing. So, John, on our side, the biomarker business is really, really in is in pumped up demand. In particular, is our flow cytometry demands are skyrocketing, as well as our cytokine for pro-inflammatory and some other COVID-related stuff. But just in general, those are really, I think we're up to 7 or 8 trials now where we're supporting COVID for biomarker testing, and probably a handful on the flow space. So really good demand there, John, and certainly don't see that slowing down anytime soon. It was already on the rise. Biomarkers were really increasing for pharmacodynamic and other needs in terms of submissions for drugs. And so with this bump in COVID, I think it's only increasing that demand.
So is this all human, or is this other?
Well, that's a good question. Mostly human, but we are seeing more and more animal, in particular with our partner Attentive. We've had like 3 or 4 would appear to be somewhat related to COVID, or at least the panels are pro-inflammatory, and they're eerily familiar to like COVID type things, the therapeutics for them. So yeah, it's the combination of both. I mean, the bigger dollars are on the clinical side, John, obviously, but the sheer number of preclinical is at an all-time high in our organization, and no end in sight.
So then this sort of reflects on the effect of COVID on clinical, etc. It's going to be interesting. We've seen the wave of drugs that were being repurposed to address COVID, but obviously the second piece is the drugs that are being developed as new entities specifically to address COVID, we'll see the wave of those coming through to clinical that should then positively impact the business. So you should see more on this front too. So yeah, the outlook is good on that from that
It's
perspective.
not. You nailed it. The vaccines are making the COVID vaccine itself is taxing the capacity of the CRO space across the board. Anyone who is involved in any way, shape, or form in a vaccine is taxed. There's a lot of overlap with the more standard just therapeutics that are not related to COVID. And then you throw in this repurposing of so many drugs to treat COVID. And I mean, we've got like a historic outlook for us in general, John. I mean, it is a good time to be in the drug development space, specifically bioanalytical. And for me personally, having in the immunology space, I don't know, very blessed and happy to be involved in all of this. I know it's tragic, but I feel like all the years of training that you do, it's these moments we can step up and help the world. So it's fantastic.
Yeah, that's the joy of being in a CRO is you get to touch so many different drugs rather than I remember talking to people that I knew in pharma companies who had worked on multiple drugs, but they'd never seen anything they worked on get through to approval. Whereas because we partner with so many different companies, there's high odds that things that we will work on will be approved, make it to market, and have a positive effect on people's lives. So it is a nice spot to be in.
Yeah, and yeah, absolutely, John. In our history at KCS, I think we have somewhere over 330 or 350 approved drugs that have gone through our laboratory. So really rich history of 40 plus years now and growing. And John, that's very proud to be part of KCS and very altruistic to be able to help. I don't know, really, it's not a tangible thing. The only downside is we're not innovators in the actual making of the drug, and so some people don't always fit in the CRO space because they want a little more like, well, I want to be I want to be really creating new things, and so it's a different mindset. But I have no problem picking up someone's ball and running with it for them, and really doesn't need to be at the first innovative point. Really good to touch it as it goes through so many different phases, which I've been very fortunate.
If we can apply our expertise and help someone get a drug to market quicker, I'm totally good with that. That's what makes it worthwhile getting up in the morning, knowing that you're doing that.
And John, to your point, a lot of we're in the funnel at the preclinical discovery stage. There's thousands of candidates before that get to the hundreds that are at that stage for us, and then thousands maybe in that area, and then hundreds, and then tens, and in the later stages in our organization, we probably have 50 in phase 2 to phase 3 that we're working on, but maybe 1,000 up front of that. And again, those are just some loose numbers, but I think you know what I mean, John. And what I'm getting at is as you're in a CRO space, there's more shots on goal and more likelihood of actual approvals, and we get to kind of lock hands with them and go across the finish line. And it's very, very nice to get. I don't know about you, John, but I've gotten letters and had phone calls, and because sometimes we help out so much in some real rare disease space that the organizations want to bring us in and help. I think it motivates everybody when we can have those opportunities.
Absolutely, yep.
So, John, I think that does it for our topic. A little bit of an emotional one. Really a very weird day, John, in terms of obviously the news from the president. But so moving along to some feedback from our audience. Just one today. This was from Chris. She said, Dominic and John, one of your best podcasts yet. She listened to podcast number 20, which featured John Bucksath. Well, thank you very much, Chris. It was a lot of fun having John Bucksath, our CEO, join us. Any thoughts about Chris's feedback on it being one of our best podcasts?
That was because we had someone else to do the talking for us.
Yeah, isn't that true? And other feedback we received was from one of our business development reps, Jeremy. He shared that he wasn't too thrilled that we spent so much time on the English Premier League, John. But He also commented on how I get mixed up a little bit sometimes with how I say laboratory and laboratory. John, I don't know if you've noticed, but periodically I've been sort of having Freudian slips, talking like, or at least try to talk like I'm from Scotland. I don't know if you've picked up on that.
No, I haven't. Don't do it.
My
That's my
laboratory.
advice.
I got a comment from one of our business development reps that he said, "I'm listening to episode number 20, and you did it again. You almost said laboratory." So I don't know what I'm doing in there, but both Jeremy Rochford, our business development rep, feedback is that I'm trying to sound like you, and that's not on purpose. I think it's Freudian. Maybe I'm just jealous of you. And then my wife picked up on it too while we were listening to it. She just shot me that, "What the heck was that?" type of look. So that's a little feedback on my end. I don't know about you, John. Anybody give you any feedback?
No, I haven't had anything like that. The laboratory thing is funny because my father came over to the US in 1969 for like a 3-month. It was called the Churchill Fellowship. So he was basically given funds to do that, and one of the messages I remember from him was he really hated the way people pronounced, is it laboratory? I can't say it, so we could say laboratory, because for him it sounded like lavatory, which is obviously a toilet. So it's weird the things you pick up as a kid, but that was one of the messages. So I've always been very firm about laboratory, so I'm not going to fall into the alternative pronunciation ever.
Well, I don't know, John. Next time I do the intro, I can't tell you which way I'm going. This is crazy. I don't know.
Laboratory is the right way to go.
So, no, that's pretty good, John. Before we go on to next week's topic, which I'm actually really looking forward to doing, I think this will be a fun topic. Any plans this weekend?
Couple. I'm actually going to test drive a car tomorrow. So I've actually put it off twice. So a couple of times. First time I was ill. Then we were going to do it earlier this week, and we just couldn't spare time during the day. So yeah, I'm actually going to test drive the Alfa Romeo Giulia. So my 10-year-old VW sadly is starting to get 10-year-old car problems. Plus, it came under major assault from our walnut tree recently. So I think I'm allowed to consider a new car. So that's what we're going for. And then the other part of it, I've talked about doing the backyard. I'm in the middle of planting spring bulbs, 766 down, but another 1,000 to go. So that's another part of the weekend plan.
Awesome. I love to hear the bulb planting. I've done. That's a big number. You're talking a couple thousand is what I think you were saying.
Yep.
And then obviously really happy for you on the car, John. That sounds exciting. On a slightly different car front, I got to try and find my son a vehicle. We will be.
What you looking for?
What's that?
What you likely looking for?
Well, some sort of like Toyota Camry, Honda Accord type, $5,000 to $8,000 vehicle that's got 100,000 miles on it that he can putz around in until he figures out how to drive. But he can officially drive. I think on the 15th of October he can start. Well, he doesn't really. School's not. I think school might open up soon. So it's always that wait and see. Here's a date where we'll make a decision about this date type of scenarios. Sure. Is what's happening.
Well, if you want,
I don't know if they're going back ever, but then he could drive himself to school and to practice, which he'll have 1 week of practice left after he gets his license. So we'll see if he does that or not, because we might not have a car by then. But that's there's always like neighborhood cars that people post and stuff, so we'll have to keep an eye out. But that's the big excitement. And then like you, I got a lot of yard work, and my new deck is in great shape. We're gonna try and start furnishing it. I just love it. Came out so well, but now it needs furniture. And then I think I'm gonna smoke some meat this weekend. That's another. Last week, John, I made a prime rib that was really good. Oh, haven't talked about prime rib, but my mother-in-law, she's got a little recipe where you thaw it, then you season it with just some salt and pepper and wrap it in saran wrap overnight, pull it out for a couple hours at room temp, and then just heat it up in a pan in the oven for like an hour at 350. And then I don't know what she does after that, but
Works some
the next
magic.
4 hours or something. Then she heats it up, and magically I have this like prime rib that I'm cutting that is delicious. So anyhow, that was that, and then I'll make a pork shoulder little.
Oh, nice.
Pork this weekend. Yeah. No, good stuff there. I'm pretty excited, pretty jacked up, and looking forward to some NFL football. Although they may delay one game. I don't know how much we want to talk about that, or for the sake of time, maybe we won't. But
go ahead.
Yeah, the Pittsburgh Steelers Tennessee Titan game. 5 Titans have been, or 5 players confirmed positive, 4 on the staff. And so that game is delayed to Monday or Tuesday. They're still waiting to see if the outbreak, how big the outbreak is, but that game's been put on hold.
Okay, I'd missed that. I hadn't seen that at all.
Yeah. And while we're finishing up, Jeremy's feedback was no more English Premier League talk either. He didn't really care for that. I'm stoked for the English Premier League. It looks exciting. Good year ahead. So.
When he starts his own podcast, he can dictate the agenda. But until then, no. So for us, so as I've said before, I support Hereford, who are in the Conference North. They were supposed. Their first official game was this Saturday. They're away to Gosport Borough in the FA Cup. But there's been a ruling announced that what they call elite clubs, which is like Conference North, Conference South, can't have any crowds. And if you've seen football at that level, it's not elite football. But it's just so for that game, Gosport are because it's the FA Cup, they're a lower league. They can have fans, but no Hereford fans can travel there. I'm mystified by some of the decisions that are being made by authorities, but yeah.
Yeah, so the Premier League has no audience at all yet. I don't think they're letting anybody in at all. And the NFL, it's weird, like 9 teams are letting people in, include Kansas City's one of them. Very strange. Some teams will let in family only. Some teams are letting 15% or 10% of the stadium in, or whatever it might be. But I think it's only a handful of teams that are doing that. I don't know.
I mean, honestly, it's if it's outdoor, there has to be a way that you can manage that. So yeah, you operate in a much reduced capacity, but you should be able to allow some sort of people in. I mean, this is like we mentioned earlier. There's the article I really do want to talk about next week, but indoor venues are your biggest issue in terms of the virus transmission. So outdoor, they should be able to find ways to mitigate things such that people can attend.
So I think like restrooms and where the restaurant, where the food stands are, is technically almost indoors, though, John. So there's the concern.
But close those. I mean, you can.
Well, I mean, now you're getting into. Why have it open at all if I can't sell a hot dog moments, John? I don't know.
You're there for the game.
Well, I don't know, John. You're old enough to know that that's not always the motivating factor. Isn't just the game itself.
No,
watch it.
I know. I always love the halftime pint of beer. When I go and see English football, but I can live without it if it's if I get to see the game and in person. It's a small sacrifice to make.
Well, John, let's quickly talk about next week's subject. Podcast number 23 next week will be non-GLP preclinical. This will be part 1 of 3. The focus will be non-GLP preclinical, and the first series is in-life bioanalytical support, or something we refer to as powder to report, and then some of the challenges with in-life non-GLP preclinical rapid studies. And then we're going to touch a little bit on non-human primate during COVID. So, John, that's an exciting little topic. We'll have a guest speaker, more importantly. We'll have our guest speaker will be Dr. Alfred Botchway from Attentive Laboratories. John, you know him well, or you're getting to know him well. I've known Alf for, 13 years now. Really good guy. Excited to have him on. John, I'll let you give some last thoughts on next week's episode.
Yeah, it'll be a relief to have another good accent on the podcast. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, with that, John, thanks for everything this week. You have a good weekend. Enjoy your car hunting, and See you in the funny pages.
Absolutely. Yeah, have a good one yourself.